So, Mike, speaking of information that sticks, in your book, The Kinesthetic Classroom, you talk about your six-part framework,
Yeah.
how the brain prefers to learn best. Can you talk to us about this and why it's important for the brain-body connection?
Yeah. So Tracy, and I will say very honestly that when Tracy presents, she relies more. We changed the framework a little bit for Ready Set Go. We shuffled it around. We gave it some new labels. I still use in my trainings. It's what I'm most comfortable with is the six-part framework that's in the original Kinesthetic Classroom. All the same thing, all the same activities. It's just framed a little differently. And the reason that we created that framework, and just to reiterate, there's activities that we can do to help prepare the brain to learn, to help support executive function, to help support vestibular system development, provide brain breaks. I know some people don't like that word, like brain blast, boosts, energizers, whatever you prefer. Supporting exercise and fitness. Step 4 is creating class cohesion. Step 5 is reviewing content, and step 6 is teaching content. And we created that framework because there's nothing out there that helped teachers organize their thoughts around physical activity. So I think teachers were, using different ideas around using physical activity, especially when multiple intelligences came to pass. Howard Gardner's work and Howard Gardner's theories, and one of those was a kinesthetic intelligence or physical intelligence. So people were using it, but not in an organized way. So this helps people to be thoughtful and purposeful, which makes it more usable and user friendly for a teacher in a classroom where they can actually sit down and think about it and add it to their lessons in a thoughtful way. So it just enhances the brain body experience in the classroom because you understand how each of these parts of the framework fit together. And oftentimes when you do one activity, it might hit 3 parts of the framework. You're doing a review content activity and you've included exercise in that activity. And it also serves as a brain break. It might help prepare the brain to learn. So, that's a more expanded notion of the framework, but you can grow to get that understanding and you become, that much more purposeful in your work.
Yeah, and you earlier on the podcast, you mentioned about having colleges and universities and the courses that we're providing to prepare educators. That's where we're going to most likely see the greater shift in using more kinesthetic or creating more kinesthetic classrooms. So when I was going to college, and I'll date myself, in 1990 to 1994, it was being taught that we had to implement the Madeline Hunter's 6-point lesson plan. And that's how we created our lesson plans. Do you see your teaching framework? Because I went from Madeline Hunter to then incorporating your teaching framework when I was introduced to it back in the early 2000s, I think, 2000 something, 2006, 7, I forget what it was, but where throw away that 6-point lesson plan, move on to the your teaching framework. Do you see more colleges and universities and teachers using this teacher framework to move and to create more of those kinesthetic classrooms?
Yeah, I do. I think so. So these are graduate courses that teachers can take, and so I see it used as a support. I think some people have taken it to the degree where every one of their lessons will have at least one part of the framework used.
Right.
And other people have become gotten to the point where they can use it spontaneously. They see an opportunity and they use a brain break, or they see a teaching opportunity and they use their bodies to teach, help students use their bodies to learn or teach a concept. But it acts more of a support with a lesson plan guide. I think what will be fantastic in any lesson planning framework that you're using to have a space for when are my kids moving, because it helps to meet basic human needs. Glasser had his list of needs. There's other people that have the lists as well, but I refer to him a lot, and we talk about survival and power and freedom and fun, etc. And when you use movement, you meet a lot of these needs. And so you're creating this classroom environment where kids are more likely to do what you want them to do and achieve in the ways that you want them to achieve. So having a space for how am I going to use physical activity in this lesson, I think is absolutely necessary and essential, and would help any lesson planning framework.
Yeah, I agree. Keith, did you have a question?
So
Okay.
Mike, with our B3 trainings that we've, developed after coming to see you guys with action-based learning, we use this framework for how we guide our trainings and our sessions. And I'll tell you, it has made all the difference in the world. And we have teachers that constantly say, there's something about your trainings that I sometimes I can't explain it, but you hooked me and I remember all the information you taught. We said, well, it's because we got you up, we got you moving, we had you engaged the whole time. So some teachers don't really understand the why until we give them that why. But then after they feel it, now they're like, there's something to this. And they're willing to take those baby steps to try to incorporate some of that into their practice.
Yeah, it's just amazing when teachers actually experience it
Mm-hmm.
and know what it feels like. That's when the change happens. Because teachers, they like to have control of their environments. They like, it works for them that kids are seated and they're in front of them and they're doing their work or they're listening, but it just doesn't look very much like life. And once teachers can get more comfortable with this really brain-friendly environment where people are up and engaged and and even moving or engaged in dialogue, it's just so much more brain-friendly. And when teachers, they need to do two things to make the change. They need to experience it. So they need to have even a half day or full day where they're actually engaged in the physical activity, and then they need to understand the science behind it.
Mm-hmm.
That compels them, to use it in their classrooms.
We certainly have a teacher that saw your training down in Charleston,
Mm-hmm.
and she has run with it to the point where she said it's re-energized her career. She does not think of a lesson without movement, and it hasn't since that training. And they say the proof is in the pudding. I mean, her kids at the end of kindergarten
Mm-hmm.
are further along than the other kindergarten teachers that are following the regular standard that's set by everybody else, because she does every single lesson she can with some sort of movement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just brain friendly. You're meeting needs. I'm really happy to hear that. And I hear, a good number of reports that way. And that's the bottom line in a school. The kids are further along.
Yeah.
There's so many reasons to use physical activity. And, academics is one of them. Motivation is another. Social emotional learning is another. It just meets so many requirements of a classroom and of a school community. And I'm really happy to hear that story. Thank you for sharing.
It makes learning fun.
Checks off all of the boxes.